The old notion of a traditional and sort of defined data warehouse still apply, or are we past that now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of change going on in how people are thinking about this. I wrote a blog post the other day just capturing our thoughts on what I called the end of the data warehouse, which probably telegraphs a little bit of what we're thinking about that. What I've seen, I used to run product at Greenplum, saw a lot of great technology and a lot of great usage, but what we've seen again and again now is companies, they have changing questions around the data. One insight leads to the next set of questions. And the data warehouse, the work they have to do, spend 12, 18 months building it out, that locks them in and restricts them from asking the kind of questions they really need to answer. So what we're seeing is really a model that says, look, we can shift the system of record from being this warehouse, this kind of defined thing that becomes so inflexible when you think about all these new types of data, to Hadoop being, is as early as it is in some ways in its development, it's a place where you can land infinite amounts of data, zero friction, and then you have to rebuild above that the ways of extracting and distilling and turning that into useful information. But the first step is you haven't thrown anything away, you have this flexibility, and then the onus is on us in the industry to turn that into, you can reconstitute data mass on the fly, you can do things with data to create the structure again in a way that isn't locking you in. It can change with your questions, it can be flexible. And we take that even further and bring that all the way up to the BI layer then. So in-memory layer that scales out all the way to the BI layer, that so a user can be exploring against all the data in Hadoop, for example. We're materializing this intermediate, these sort of data marts on the fly in memory to allow interactivity, but you can always go drill through to get more detail and it'll refine that for you. So you're never stuck waiting for IT and saying, I need to get to this data, and it'll be like 6 months wait. It's always self-service against however much data you have behind that.
Right. What do you feel are Hadoop's biggest issues, and how should they be addressed? I realize that's a big question.
No, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think it goes to the double-edged sword. I mean, at one level, the genius of Hadoop is the lack of needing to have structure at the beginning. You can just write things in there. That's fantastic and powerful. But then you need to kind of add that in, sprinkle it in, so you don't reintroduce this inflexibility, but you have to bring that back. And so there's efforts like HCatalog and Hive, a lot of this great advancement around Hive and other things that are going on that are all good, and we encourage them because they make it more queryable, you have more information, and you bring back in a little more of the structure. We think we need to go a lot further, and we've talked to like a large investment bank where they're thinking about Hadoop as being the sort of mixing bowl for all the data, but there's a whole stack of BI and analytics that has to come up from that rebuilds all the things they used to do before, but in this much more agile, much more iterative world. And I think that's the opportunity, is if we can make that real, we're just a light years ahead of the old stacks that we used to deal with. IT's out of the picture. I mean, we're out of this insanity of 12, 18-month cycles that just make no sense. And we can, the customers and users will be just blown away by what's possible. But we have a lot of work as an industry to turn to complete that. And we're doing our part, but I think there's a lot collectively we're all going to have to do to make that real.
If Hadoop and other data tools become easier to use, what do you think that's going to yield?
Sure. Well, I think we did a demo just earlier today here at the show, and it was around a hypothetical use case of an online video store, like could be a Netflix or an Amazon or something like that. And the scenario involved trying to decipher why. So something had happened where the amount of traffic had dropped off, and trying to look at why that could be. And as we explore, we see, well, part of it is seasonality, part of it's the days of the week, part of it's the types of movies. The hit movies create these peaks, and you can sort of see that and very visually explore it. But then you start going deeper, and you understand, well, there are things like, well, the CDN may have failed, or the bit rate dropped, or my advertising conversion rates, my bid price was too low and I'm not getting ad placements that are driving traffic. And so to actually derive those insights, you have to go back to source data. And so, if we can go from a model where those are major, like the kind of scenario we played out traditionally, that would be some CEO or like a top executive saying this has to be done. It becomes a corporate initiative. You spend a year building it out because otherwise you can't bring all that data together. There's no business case out of the gate to do all that work. But if it becomes an analyst sitting down in an afternoon and doing it, then it's a whole different game.
Sure. Yeah. So. No, that could be a huge deal.
Yeah.
Last question for you.
Yeah.
What will data tools look like in 5 years? I mean, will we not even be talking about tools anymore? We'll be talking about things like insights?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll be a lot closer to focusing on the data. I think, well, the data remains important. I think one of the things that, there was a great question I saw posed at a conference recently, is, when you talk about big data, should it be big intelligence, big insights, instead of big data? Yeah. And I think the interesting thing is, I might have said at one point that's true, but I think that's dead wrong today, because really, data is the raw material, the things that you mine insight from. You don't know what insights you want until you have a question you need to answer. And so if I can't look at data and say, I can throw that away because it's not important anymore, because the question I get a year from now may tap into that data.
Right.
So to presume that you can figure this out and be smart about, well, what you need and what you don't is way too presumptive.
Yeah.
And so I think it really is about, let's nurture storing these immense amounts of data. Let's make it very easy to have this natural resource on tap. But then, how do we then turn that into this sort of collaborative, discovery-driven, just very, very fluid way that you can work against that, where you're never thinking about IT projects, you're never thinking about warehouses and implementation and consultants. People go in and they ask questions, they figure things out, they share them, they discuss them, and they use that data as an asset. And I think that's definitely where we're headed. And I think a lot of people here are excited to be part of that journey.
Sure thing. Great. Well, thanks so much for being
with us. Absolutely, very good. Thank you.